shame is nothing without the norm that it's attached to, right? So people have said, oh, we should get rid of shame from the medical profession because so many doctors are not admitting their mistakes out of shame. To me, you're aiming at the wrong target. It's not shame that's the problem. For instance, we want doctors to feel like they should be the best surgeons possible or whatever. It's the idea that in the medical profession, no one makes mistakes. That's the real problem. So in trying to change the norm, the shame is only calibrated to that norm. And I certainly think that in a sense, what you're saying, and I live among conservation scientists, so I know exactly the debate you're talking about, is it's almost okay it's almost, I guess, not okay to say that, to talk about intrinsic value, to talk about the idea that we would protect species because it's the right thing to do. I mean, that's been the more marginalized ideology, I guess. And the other one says more about, contingent valuation or ecosystem services or what have you. I can only say that in both those debates, shame plays a role. Like if you're in a meeting, a faculty meeting, and you know that the majority of people in the room do not see things the way you do, you will, and it can work on both sides of the coin. And then that's why who's in the group matters. But I certainly, I tried to promote the former norm that you were discussing because I think it's the one that gets us furthest, actually. I think once you, the idea that we talk about everything in terms of dollar terms is what should be shameful. And it's why I left the field of economics, ultimately, because I just thought this is so ridiculous. I mean, money is even just such a new thing from an evolutionary perspective, and people buying into it in such like deep and profound ways, it just seems so silly. So I'm fighting on one norm, but then there are teams of economists fighting on the other norm. So we'll see who wins in 20 years.
Sort of a similar question. I'm just thinking about audience response to, especially like Blackfish. That was really powerful movie.
Yeah.
What do you find audience respond to better, like shaming in terms of saving animals or the human effects of environmental degradation?
Well, so it's funny because I just on Friday was at a conference with the executive producer of Blackfish, so the film was spoken about a lot because the film, if you haven't seen it, has a very strong human dimension. Running throughout the film are the trainers who are getting dragged into the water and threatened, of course, by these rogue orcas. So it felt like, to me, the human dimension is what pulled the story forward. But at the end of the day, what people remembered and what they fought for were the orcas. So it had this strange idea that people weren't, in the end of the day, writing letters to OSHA about worker safety, even though that was like such a big part of the film, because that's how they got the videos. It was all from the OSHA release and Freedom of Information Act, but that wasn't where their attention was ultimately, even though it's what dragged the story through this hour and a half. So it was a strange mix. But also, I think shaming can always backfire, if you don't know your audience. In the case of documentaries, there's almost no one who's forced, right, to see it. It's all this voluntary buy-in. But a case I like to bring up is the Westboro Baptist Church, who most people know, famous shamers. They carry around, I think they like print shame signs as like their hobby. And they went to Silverton, Oregon to protest the first democratically elected transgender mayor. Stu Rasmussen was his name. And people in the town, when Stu was elected, he had been elected before he was transgender, or openly transgender. And then because they knew him and because over time, and a lot of the people in the town, you can listen to a Radio Lab about it, they were like not that keen on him being transgender, but they knew him and felt like he was a good mayor, so let's just vote for him. After Westboro Baptist showed up, the townspeople, a lot of them showed up then dressed in women's clothes, men dressed in women's clothes, with their own shame signs, And the Westboro Baptist Church actually had the effect of moving the town's norms and standards much closer to the transgender mayor than they had been before the Westboro Baptist Church came. So it had the complete opposite effect of what they were hoping for. And this is also, do you know your audience? Do you know what how they're going to respond? This was not, the Westboro Baptist was not a source of shame that that Silverton respected, for sure. And actually it made his rise in I think, in politics as an openly transgender person easier, ironically.